If food can tell you something about who you are or where you are, what time of year it is, where you grew up, who your parents were, or, just, what you might be doing at the moment, I think that people enjoy that.
Bill was this enormous presence.
He was a natural star. There was nothing about getting attention that he didn't like.
Bill was one of the first people to realize that sort of simple good food was valid. There was nothing wrong with it.
If it's going to be barbecue or fried chicken or shrimp and grits or a nice, elegant version of chicken and dumplings, it doesn't have to suck.
Before Bill Neal, a typical Southern restaurant was a fish camp or a barbecue joint. For fine dining, there were steakhouses. That was about it.
Bill Neal was one of the real early adapters of Southern regional awesomeness. And the way that he was able to, in a very intelligent way, articulate it both on a plate and in the pages of his cookbook, built a foundation for what all the Southern chefs are doing now.
In 1970, Durham. Bill was living on fish sticks and Jell-O at the Duke cafeteria. But when he visited my relatives in Mississippi, we went to all the family haunts down in New Orleans, Galatoire's, Arnaud's, Antoine's, and Brennan's. And I remember so vividly Bill's first taste of trout almondine at Galatoire's. It was almost like watching Helen Keller discover language.
I think he adored Antoine's for its pageantry. New Orleans French Creole was really arguably one of the first fusion cuisines in the world. The African and Caribbean influence, in New Orleans, and these French chefs trying to recreate to the best of their ability the food of their homeland, that was, totally, right in Bill's wheelhouse.
Bill was home with our baby, and while I was working at night, he was cooking his way through mastering the art of French cooking. I think that's when Bill got the idea that he could be a chef for a living. We happened to have a friend, R.B. Fitch, who owns Farrington, and he wanted to see what we thought about opening a restaurant there. So we toured the house, hosted by Jesse Farrington and his wife, whose family had owned the farm for 200 years. And R.B. said, how'd you like to come out here and open a restaurant in this house? I'll rent you the house. And we said, all right, let's do it. We both quit our jobs at the end of the year, 1975. We started on Mother's Day, 1976. The name that popped up was La Residence because it was a residence. We never even meant to be a French restaurant. We were more oriented toward New Orleans. So we were more of a regional restaurant than a French restaurant, kind of a hybrid.
The kitchen at La Residence was quite dynamic. Most places had a menu they printed out, and that was that forever. But ours changed constantly. I remember Bill once telling us that the kitchen within certain bounds was a laboratory. Occasionally a tart would be lopsided, or mirepoix was never all exactly the same dice and all this stuff. And I remember him saying one time, we do everything homemade here. Everything's made by hand, so there's nothing wrong with it looking like it. And that was very good advice. I also use that to this day.
Bill Smith started his chef career in Bill Neal's kitchen at La Residence. Bill Neal said of Bill Smith that he had the best taste buds he'd ever met, that Bill Smith could taste a dish and break it down to the ingredients that made that dish. It was a talent.
We didn't understand that we needed to be making money. It was artistically successful, for sure.
It could be loud at night, and I'd be just right upstairs in my bedroom. And sometimes customers would just start touring the house, because they're just having a good time and drinking wine. And there were usually little ropes and stuff to try to deter people from coming upstairs and walking through my bedroom while I was trying to sleep at night. But it definitely happened.
Yeah, we lived right there. It was intense.
The character of the celebrity chef hadn't been fully articulated yet when Bill Neal and some of his fraternity were cooking. And a lot of these chefs like Bill were gay at a time when being out was not exactly a safe thing to be.
Bill and I had a very close relationship. I left La Res first because of that relationship. And Bill stayed with La Res for another couple of months, and then he left When we opened Crook's in 1982, the menu was a mixture of diner American with some French influence.
This place had been a sort of a barbecue and oyster joint, cold beer and ice buckets sort of place.
Crook's is crazy. You know, it felt like sort of like a fight could break out at any time. There were awkward first dates.
Somebody said, oh, they need a dishwasher where I work, and we were on the way to the quarry to go swimming. We swung by the restaurant, and I talked to Bill Neal, and he put me on the schedule and advised me to wear shoes when I came to work.
He loved to take, an individual ingredient and just like sort of make me stop whatever I was doing and go, all right, do you really understand the avocado? And we sat there for about 20 minutes, like talking about an avocado.
One wall of the kitchen had 3 shelves of cookbooks. And when, Bill would say, I want a shrimp Creole recipe, go look in this book and whatever else you can find. So you started out with the cookbooks and cross-referenced everything and then went into it.
The night that Craig Claiborne, the New York Times food critic, came, Bill, of course, was a little nervous.
Craig Claiborne was the kingmaker in the culinary world at that time, and when he put his spotlight on you, everybody knew about you.
As a writer, I can understand Craig Claiborne's excitement about walking into a region that hadn't been written about before and finding this guy who had all the kind of fabulousness and flair of a lot of big city chefs, but dedicating himself to the Southern plate, the kinds of dishes that Craig Claiborne grew up on as a kid in Mississippi.
The next 2 articles were all about Crook's and Bill, and boom, we were on the map.
It set off the bomb. It put Bill on the map and sort of named him as the guy.
So everybody was really stretched thin, and I was veering towards, being a juvenile delinquent. And, as a way for him to know where I was, I got chained to the dishwashing station.
In the kitchen, he was very exact and very focused. He was the boss.
There was always somebody who was the bad guy in the kitchen. There was somebody who was the weak link.
He could be very critical and biting to people that didn't meet his standards.
I remember him just like, he looked up from his paperwork and snarled at me and said, "What the F do you want?" And I tried to approach it very calmly. I said, "Well, Bill, I don't feel like I deserve to be treated the way that I have been the last few days." And he just went off on this tear about he didn't give a shit about what I thought. And he just screamed at me to the point where I just reared back and I took this full cup of coffee and I threw it at him as hard as I could.
This was the first wave of regional cuisine love in America. Bill Neal was a part of a group of chefs who took a very educated, very erudite approach to what they were cooking. They studied where the food came from, the cultural traditions, as well as cooking techniques. It was a very clean and intelligent definition of the food of their region.
I made a dish that was taken from a traditional Charleston dish, shrimp and grits. First time I put shrimp and grits on the menu, everybody thought that was the strangest thing they'd ever heard of. Now, if I don't have it on the menu, everybody complains. We came for shrimp and grits.
It's delicious.
I know, you've had that recipe. You've had the original form, too.
Bill introduced shrimp and grits to the world here. It was a huge hit at once, and now it's inescapable. It's everywhere. It's shrimp, mushrooms, scallions, bacon, garlic, a little lemon juice, and then put on cheese grits. And it's really very simple. And that's a good thing, because we do a lot of it, so.
Well, I think one thing that I got from Crook's was that I like a place that has a big mix of clientele, and that's what I really like here. And since we are small and we have an open kitchen, I see, just about everybody that comes in here, and we have a lot of regulars who come in every day or maybe twice a day.
5 chicken salad sandwiches. You want some of the green tomato pickles?
People from all over the country walk in here and they say, "I just had to see this place. I had to come in here, and I really wanted to tell you, I love your dad's cookbook, and I use it, and it's touching, it's sweet," and it continues to happen.
When Bill's book, Southern Cooking, came out, first of all, everyone in town was very proud, because everyone by then was aware of sort of the chef thing going on, right? But he was ours, so that was cool.
The depth of his knowledge about his subject matter in that tiny little book is absolutely astounding.
It was a very intelligent approach to cookbook writing that I think at the time was rare.
As the Crooks thing kind of took off, you know, he was like thinking, I don't want to do this forever. I want to be a writer, and in order to be a writer, I guess I'm going to have to write. So now I need to write articles about food or travel or cookbooks.
Biscuit, Spoon Bread, and Sweet Potato Pie was a Southern baking book. His last book was actually a garden book. It was called Gardener's Latin, and it was his most successful book. People don't talk about that, but this book sold more than any of his cookbooks. Had he lived, I imagine he would have gone into writing more about gardening and travel and things like that, and I think he could have made a go of it. One day, 1989, I think it was, he came to my house and he said, I need to talk to you about something. And I said, okay, what is it? And he said, I have a rare disease. And he didn't tell me it was AIDS, although people knew what AIDS was at the time.
But we were sitting in the front of the restaurant. He said, let's have dinner. I want to talk to you. So he told me that he was sick. And I just thought, oh, Lord. Because I'd had several friends who had succumbed to this disease already.
When you're young, you know, when your parents are going through stuff like that, you don't know what to do about it. You don't know how to deal with it or talk about it.
I remember talking with him, and his doctor came in, and he said, y'all got to go. We got a battle to fight. We got a battle to fight. Whew, then he just went out. That's the last time I saw him.
A friend called me up and said, you've got to tell him that you love him. And I thought, I'm not going to tell him that I love him. So the next day I went to the hospital, and I left the room, walked to the elevator, and I could hear my friend's voice saying, go back and tell him you love him. And so I got to the elevator opened, I turned around, walked back to the room, and said, I love you. And he said, I love you. That was his last words to me. I never saw him again. He died that night.
You know, Bill's with me here every day. I walk into here, and he's here because we started it together. Bill tried, and I think very successful, at demonstrating the diversity of the cuisine of the South. And said, hey, look at us. Look at what we have to offer.
Probably the main thing he did was that he made it so it wasn't the Beverly Hillbillies anymore.
You know, there is a little bit of mystery to Bill because, you know, he departed early. We're having to, you know, now, 25 years later, try to scratch our heads and go, what would Bill have done?